All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for your attendance here at the Shadle Park Library for a dual event that we're going to be hosting this afternoon. First half of our festivities will involve a three-member discussion panel with question and answer about the last 15 minutes of the hour. And then you folks are going to be introduced and hear from a bunch of wonderful candidates that are running for public office on all ends of the spectrum, local, state, and federal level. Some of the candidates that were not able to be here today, you will be hearing from via video over here on the screen to my left. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 18th PATRIOT Gathering here, sponsored by the Vietnamese American Senior Association. And as well, like I said, during the second half of this function, you'll be hearing from and being introduced to various Republican candidates that have filed for office. Just know that your ballots are going to be coming out in the mail to you in about 3 weeks. So now is a great time and a good opportunity today to learn who it is that you folks may be casting your votes for. Elections have become a very interesting situation in our great United States of America, and I'm sure everybody here will agree. As long as we continue to show up at the ballot box and participate in this civic duty that we have all grown up with, now is the time to vote. In the event that you haven't participated in the ballot box exercise in the past, for sure. What we want to do to go ahead and open the festivities this morning is we're going to give the glory to God first, then we're going to engage in respect for our country and our flags. My contribution, aside being your master of ceremonies today, and in the spirit of keeping America strong, I would like to offer the following statistics. 57% of fatherless homes are Black households. 31% of those households are Hispanic. 20% happen to be white. We're talking about fatherless families, ladies and gentlemen, since tomorrow is Father's Day, a worldwide recognized holiday, if you will, that originated right here in the city of Spokane some years ago. 63% of youth who commit suicide do not have a father in the home. 70% of juveniles in state-regulated institutions come from fatherless homes. 71% of all high school dropouts don't have a dad. 75% of rapists, motivated by misplaced anger, don't have a dad while they've grown up. 75% of adolescent patients in substance abuse centers don't have involved fathers. 85% of youth in prisons come from fatherless homes. 85% of all fatherless children exhibit behavioral disorders. And finally, 90% of all homeless and runaways come from fatherless homes. Let that sink in, ladies and gentlemen. We do have a problem in the United States of America. We may recognize that a whole lot of our institutions have been co-opted and taken over by Marxists and communist tendencies and philosophies. The institution of education, in my heart of hearts, is the last bastion of freedom where we all, grandfathers, grandmothers, moms, dads, uncles, brothers, sisters, we all need to come together and we need to protect our legacy. Our legacy being our children. Our children are not being taught the kind of school and the kind of courses that we all were taught. These things have become monsters and definitely lend well to indoctrinating our children to believe the falsehoods that come with Marxism and communism and socialism. So it is incumbent upon everybody in this room here today to gather up our children and protect them in the best way that we can. I think there'd be several people in this room here this afternoon that would agree with me. One of the good things to come out of the COVID lockdowns that we all experienced was the fact that as grandparents and as parents, we got an opportunity to see what kind of curriculum our children were being exposed to when they were relegated to homeschool. School on the laptop. Definitely a failed experiment, and we are going to end up seeing the results of that several years down the road. I'll now provide some inspirational words and a prayer with regard to Father's Day. Please join me if you would like. Father God, we give our thanks for the fathers in our lives. Fatherhood does not come with a manual, and reality teaches us that some fathers excel while others may fail. We ask your blessings for them all and forgiveness where it is needed. This Father's Day, we remember the many sacrifices that fathers make for their children and families, and the ways, both big and small, they lift children to achieve dreams thought beyond reach. So too, we remember all those who have helped fill the void when fathers pass early or are absent. Grandfathers, uncles, brothers, cousins, teachers, pastors, coaches, and the women of our families. For those who are fathers, we ask for wisdom and humility in the face of the task of parenting. Give them the strength to do well by their children and by you, Lord. In your Son's Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Now, if you all would stand to honor and respect both the flags of the United States of America and the Vietnamese freedom flag. After we hear the national anthems of both countries, I will lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early lights what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous nights o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave? For the land of the free and the home of the brave. Này công dân ơi, đứng lên đáp lời sông núi, đồng lòng cùng đi hy sinh tiếc gì hơn sao, vì tương lai quốc dân cùng sống qua khói tên, làm sao cho núi sông từ nay luôn vững bền, dù cho thầy phơi trên tương giao, đủ luôn lấy màu đào đem bao, rồi đâu lúc biên mãi gần giải nguy, người công dân luôn vững bền tâm trí, trang quyết chiến đấu làm cho cả đời vang tiếng người nước Nam cho đến muôn đời. Công dân ơi,
join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so very much. You may be seated. I'm going to go a little bit off script. And here's what we're going to do. Do we have any Vietnam veterans in the room? Do we have any non-American Vietnam veterans in the room that have not received their 50th anniversary pin? If we have anybody like that, please come forward. I have a gift for you. Michael and Mary, if you would come forward. As non-combatants, but very heavily involved, I would definitely like to award you with 50th anniversary Vietnam veteran pin.
I received it from my father. He was a colonel during war. Thank you, Mr. Mike Fagan. Mr. Mike Fagan, thank you so much for being MC. Thank you, Mr. Mike Fagan, for being MC for us. Mr. Mike Fagan has been mentor and sponsor of the Vietnamese Senior Association, Vietnamese American Senior Association. With his assistance, Spokane City officially recognized this yellow flag as the Vietnamese heritage flag and the freedom flag and the anti-communist flag, and also to honor Vietnam veterans. It's a symbol of the free Vietnamese community. And thank you, Mr. Mike Fagan. Chúng ta biết ơn ông Mike Fagan đã giúp cho hội cao niên vinh danh lá cờ vàng, cờ tự do, cờ chống cộng sản, cờ vinh danh cựu chiến binh từng tham chiến ở Việt Nam. My name is Mary Nguyen. Over there, the busy tech guy, this is my honey Michael, the tech guy. People tease that we are like the velociraptors working in pairs. Our Spokane team is very happy to coordinate this event with Michelle Lay and the Seattle team from the Washingtonians for Change. Michelle is the Vice President of the Vietnamese American community of King County and Snow County, and Executive Board member of King County GOP. Thank you, Michelle. Nearly 40 years ago, Michelle's father, Michael, and we belong to the resistance movement called the National Front for the Liberation of Vietnam. Rất vui được cộng tác với Michelle Lê, một hậu duệ của Việt Nam Cộng Hòa, rất yêu nước và dấn thân tích cực ở Seattle và phụ cận. Thưa các anh chị, Michelle là Phó Chủ tịch Cộng đồng Người Việt Tự do ở King County và Snow County. Sorry, just a little bit Vietnamese, okay? We are thrilled to have a lot of GOP candidates here. We have a burning desire to turn Washington red, to keep America strong, to make America great again. And we love to welcome everyone, just in general, distinguished panelists, government officials, GOP members, John Bush Society, the Vietnamese seniors, friends, and everyone attending. And thank you. This event is also live streams on YouTube and Facebook, so we have a large audience. Okay. Dear fellow patriots, recently VASA means Vietnamese American Senior Association, we send letters to the Vietnamese community like this. As Vietnamese refugees escape from communism, we clearly realize that our United States is attacked by the communist forces, causing great social disorder and turbulences. When our homeland, USA, is threatened dangerously, each of us is affected. At this patriotic gathering event, we will hear from the scholars, the journalists, and the candidates so we can be knowledgeable, be vigilant, and to vote wisely. Vote wisely. Congresswoman Kathy McMorris sent us a card saying, with each election, the core question of our political process is the fundamental choice between the belief of freedom and right endowed by our Creator, so elegantly expressed in our Constitution, versus the controlling socialist state of the left. We couldn't agree more. Controlling. All tyrannical, oppressive government want to control. On last forum, Professor Eric Cunningham talked about Marxism, Maoism, class struggles, class welfare, and the dangerous communist revolution tactics to create fear and to control people. The Chinese say, sát nhất nhân vạn nhân cổ, meaning to kill one person is to incite fear for 1,000 people. You read Chinese, you know that. Right? Suddenly, American cities have fearful street violences, riot, terrorists, criminals, killers, looters, businesses burned, churches on fire, historical sites destroyed, trains robbed, police forces defunded, illegal immigrants, criminals, human trafficking, drugs continue to flood the United States borders. Fraudulent elections, workers, soldiers, teachers, students, young students are forced to take dangerous COVID vaccines. No job, no job. Employees laid off, soldiers discharged, work education, racism, hate, CRT, class struggles, sex, transgender are teaching in schools. Mrs. Lay Southwell just said, we are seeing the collapse of our great society. But there's great hope. Tough times don't last, but tough people do. There is a patriotic fire burning in our hearts. A patriotic movement in USA, and resistance is everywhere, and people are courageous. Be courageous. Yes, Mrs. Paulson, I love that. Be courageous. And Americans are standing up to fight for their beliefs. And journalist William Jasper repeatedly said, resistance is not futile. It is a duty. Did you know how people resist when Saigon was locked down during COVID? Suddenly, overnight, millions of people just walked out of their homes to the rural areas to get away from lockdown, hunger, and isolation. Since the US soldier pulled out of Vietnam in 1973, Vietnamese people are always in a resistance movement. They never give up the fight against communism and the Chinese invasion. Vietnam was colonized like 100 years under the French, 1,000 years dominated by the brutal Han Chinese, and our heroic ancestors always fought diligently with blood and tears throughout 5,000 years of history. Dear fellow patriots, our Vietnamese ancestors say, non sông như tạc anh hùng thể. The nation's mountains and rivers are carved with oaths of heroic people. The American founding fathers were heroic geniuses. They sacrificed so much to create this great nation under God with liberty and justice for all, the land of the free and the home of the brave. I learned three great thoughts. Thomas Jefferson said, the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Patrick Henry says, life is so dear, or peace is so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of change and slavery? Forbid it. Almighty God, I know not what coax other may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. And President Ronald Reagan said, if we ever forget that we are one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under. At this turbulent time, each of us must be a freedom fighter to preserve our United States of America, the greatest nation on earth. God bless America and God bless you all. Thank you for listening.
For those that don't know me, my name is Mike Fagan, former two-term Spokane City Councilman, also the commander of the Hilliard Veterans of Foreign Wars Post. I happen to be in my VFW garb today because I'm playing hooky from the 102nd State Convention that is being hosted downtown right now. So it's definitely an honor and a privilege to be with everybody in this room. You know, when I was on the council, Mary and Michael and Vasa was looking for sponsors for the Vietnamese American Senior Association. And it's my understanding that none of the other council members would talk to Michael and Mary about sponsoring a proclamation or helping them out in any way. Mary and Michael learned that I was a veteran and they came to me next, and the next thing you know, it's all history. Mary and Michael have motivated and inspired the Vietnamese American Senior Association to basically host events like this, and they've been doing that ever since the first proclamation that Mayor Condon ended up issuing with regard to the Vietnamese freedom flag, the recognition of the Lunar New Year, and things to that effect. So Michael and Mary, thank you so very much for working with the city and the county and the state and other associations across the United States for sure. All right, folks, without further ado, again, we have got up here on their three-member panel, Professor Eric Cunningham from Gonzaga, journalist William Jasper, senior editor of the New American Magazine, and as well, Leah Southwell, who happens to be an educator and one heck of a patriot. Known Leah for on and off there for a lot of years now. And I'll tell you, if you want to learn about Marxism, socialism, communism, sit down with Leah for a couple minutes. She just got done fleeing a South American country because they ended up reverting back to the dastardly ways. As well, if you'd like to learn a bit about what happened over in Vietnam with socialism, communism, Marxism, please take a few minutes and sit down and talk with Mary and Michael for sure. All right, our three-member panel. I don't know how this is going to kick off and who is going to go first, but your mics are hot, so please feel free to engage.
All right, I guess I'll go first. Can you hear me?
Turn it up or turn it on, one of the two.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll go first. I'll try to be brief too. I think my co-panelists here have much more interesting things to say than I do. I am Eric Cunningham, and yes, I am a professor at Gonzaga, but I always have to make it clear at events like this that I do not represent Gonzaga in any way. They made sure to make sure I say that. I don't represent Gonzaga in any way. I speak only for myself. But because I am a professor, I'm very, very good at giving trigger warnings. So I have two. The first is, I'm afraid that some of my comments today may not be well taken, given that this is an event that features the candidates running for office this year, all of whom I've seen before in various places, and all of whom I respect. But I find it increasingly important these days to remind myself and others, when possible, that the greatest problems facing human civilization in our country right now may not really be entirely political, but maybe philosophical in some way. And this prompts my second trigger warning. Mike, go ahead. I'm about to introduce an ethnic slur here, which I apologize for. It's not my own. In questioning the origin of our problems, I share this opinion with a character from a Tom Robbins novel called Even Cowgirls Get the Blues. And the character is unfortunately named the Chink. Now, this person, again, I apologize for perpetuating this slur against Chinese people, but in the interest of literary accuracy, I don't want to come up with some false substitute. So there he is, and I'll just put that out there for what it's worth. The slur is Robin's own, not mine. So it's also worth mentioning that in the book and in the movie, this character was actually Japanese, not Chinese. So the insult was leveled not at Chinese people, but rather Americans who have the tendency, some Americans who have the tendency not to bother to find out who they're actually talking to before they insult them or come to judgments about their character, which seems to be a lingering problem in American society. But notice what the character here says in response to Sissy's question to him and her concern that he doesn't seem to be very interested in politics. And he says, I believe in political solutions to political problems, but man's primary problems aren't political, they're philosophical. Until humans can solve their philosophical problems, they're condemned to solve their political problems over and over and over again. It's a cruel, repetitious bore. So I would submit that, today, in this very week, the greatest general problem facing the entire Western civilization is that we seem to be swimming in an ocean of lies. And we seem to lack the capacity even to identify them as such, let alone correct them. Every day with mind-numbing repetition, our elites are spreading false information and concealing accurate information about the causes of inflation, about the strength of our economy, about the origins of the COVID virus, about the effectiveness and safety of COVID vaccines, about the war in Ukraine, about pretty much everything. And I don't want to sound facetious, but if our media and political elites are talking about anything, they are most likely lying about it. This is a problem. And unfortunately, this brings us closer to today's concerns. Among the greatest lies we're being told right now have to do with elections. It's been my suspicion since November 3rd, 2020, that the presidential election was tampered with in some way by some group of people in possession of remarkably sophisticated technology and decisive control of the major media. While I was far from alone in harboring these suspicions, I was one of the very few people I knew who said anything about it in public. It was but a suspicion, but based on some overwhelming evidence, mostly in the form of sworn affidavits reporting registration irregularities, ballot harvesting, ballot shredding, ballot box stuffing, and electronic manipulation of various kinds, almost all of which were ignored by law enforcement, legislatures, courts, the U.S. Attorney General, by the media, and by the academic community. The evidence was even ignored by prominent Republicans, despite the fact that their party was on the receiving end of all of the suspected malfeasance. There were no Democrats saying that, I think the election was stolen. That was in 2016. But this very week, we've been bombarded by a bizarre set of hearings related to the demonstrations of January 6, 2021, which began as protests against these very election irregularities, but have always been characterized by the left as wanton acts of domestic terrorism and a violent insurrection. An insurrection so violent, so reckless, and so threatening to our democracy that the incarceration of over 800 people, only a fraction of whom have been tried or have received any sentences, was considered perfectly appropriate and fully in keeping with the due process of law. So, in the ensuing 18 months, on the basis of forensic audits in some places and acknowledgement of obvious wrongdoing in others, credible officials of various strata in several swing states have declared that their 2020 results probably never should have been certified. And 2 months ago, Dinesh D'Souza's 2000 Mules was released, bringing to the attention of a much wider group of people some of the specific irregularities. The film focused, of course, on the identification of mules and ballot box stuffing incidents using sophisticated GPS tracking methods, and raised, at the very least, a serious number of questions about the integrity of our voting system. Like everybody on the planet, I, despite my well-informed suspicions, possess only a fraction of the information I need to conclude precisely what happened, because our media, our universities, and our politicians refuse to hold an honest, comprehensive discussion about this matter. But I will say with 100% confidence that anybody who thinks that the election of 2020 was fair, unfettered, honest, and transparent, or to quote CBS and the Joe Biden administration, the most secure election in history, is suffering from a fundamental inability or an unwillingness to process some very basic information. So it strikes me today that there is no issue, local, state, or national, more important than getting to the bottom of that concern of the election of 2020 and bringing to justice any and all people who are complicit in the tampering of that election. Because if any election can be stolen, all of them can be stolen. Until the integrity of our elections can be guaranteed, all of our aspirations for freedom and good government are a joke. I've talked to a lot of conservatives who believe that in regions like Eastern Washington, we don't need to worry about election rigging because our bright red demographics make them all but impossible to steal. Which is a lot like saying that it doesn't matter if we have to shave a few points on the basketball court because the gamblers in Las Vegas have told us we can win the game anyway. This is not a good approach to this problem. If the members of a political party, if we as members of a party or voters in general willingly participate in any rigged system, we are absolutely part of the problem. And unless we have a specific strategy to fix the problem, therefore we had better have a specific strategy to fix this problem at every level, city council all the way up. So this year, I think the strategies, from what I can tell, is to turn out in such vast numbers that the ability of certain parties to perform shenanigans, which is the media's favorite word to describe voter fraud, would be decisively hampered, or the shenanigans would be so egregious that even Fox News and the attorney generals would have to admit that it took place. It seems like a bit of a risk to run that strategy. I think it's just as well to prosecute the criminals that we know and proceed from there. But I'm not in charge of anything, and I'm not running for office. And I know these are things that we don't usually discuss in polite circles, so having made my basic point, I'll shut up and apologize for any breach of good manners I may have committed. I suspect I've ruffled a few feathers, and I'm sure that some people here may think that I am that most despicable of creatures, the conspiracy theorist. I would rather classify myself as a conspiracy analyst because, as I've said before, I don't know enough about what's going on to have any conclusive political theories of my own. I have only one theory, and it's a philosophical theory, and it goes like this. There is nothing more important or more valuable in the cosmos than the free, autonomous soul seeking communion with its creator. That's it. That's my theory. I know that there are a lot of conservatives who don't particularly like talk about God's spirit and souls, so I will restate my position without the potentially offending theological microaggression. There's nothing more important or valuable in the world than the free autonomous subject seeking constructive harmony with nature and society. In both versions, what matters most in the great frame of reality is the promotion of the freedom of the human being, with all the responsibility that entails. Every single institution created by human beings must serve this primary operation. And if it doesn't matter if we're a nation, a university, a school, an army, or a shoe store, if we're not dedicated first and foremost to the advancement of human freedom, then we have no business claiming the votes, the loyalty, the attention, or the consumer dollars of any other members of our species. But the promotion of freedom is predicated on a requirement for truth. As that famous historical figure, Jesus of Nazareth, once observed, the truth is the thing that sets us free. And I know Jesus also claimed to be that truth. So that's a theological and not a political pronouncement. So I don't want to end on a needlessly controversial note. Instead, I'll quote the great Russian novelist, the great Russian novelist Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who knew a lot about swimming in an ocean of lies as a political prisoner in the Soviet Union for many years. So this snippet I'm about to read, and it's long, but it bears reading. It comes from a long statement that he made in 1974, shortly before his exile to the United States, and it's called "Live Not by Lies." So let me read this. When violence bursts onto the peaceful human condition, its face is flushed with self-assurance. It displays on its banner and proclaims, "I am violence. Make way, step aside, I will crush you." But violence ages swiftly. A few years pass, and it is no longer sure of itself. To prop itself up, to appear decent, it will without fail call forth its ally, lies. For violence has nothing to cover itself with but lies, and lies can only persist through violence. And it is not every day and not on every shoulder that violence brings down its heavy hand. It demands of us only a submission to lies and daily participation in deceit, and this suffices as our fealty. And therein we find, neglected by us, the simplest, most accessible key to our liberation: a personal non-participation in lies. Even if all is covered by lies, even if all is under their rule, let us resist in the smallest way. Let their rule not hold through me. And this is the way to break out of the imaginary encirclement of our inertness. This is still Solzhenitsyn, by the way, not me. The easiest way for us and the most devastating for the lies. For when people renounce lies, lies simply cease to exist. Like parasites, they can only survive when attached to a person. We are not called upon to step out into the square and shout out the truth, to say out loud what we think. This is scary and we are not ready. But at least let us refuse to say what we do not think. This is the way, then, the easiest and most accessible for us, given our deep-seated organic cowardice. Much easier than it's scary to even utter the words, civil disobedience a la Gandhi. Our way must be never knowingly support lies. Having understood where the lies begin, and many see this line differently, step back from that gangrenous edge. Let us not glue back the flaking scales of the ideology, nor gather back its crumbling bones, nor patch together its decomposing garb, and we will be amazed how swiftly and helplessly the lies will fall away, and that which is destined to be naked will be exposed as such to the world. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We all know? There we go. Thank you, Professor Cunningham, to which I say amen, amen. We are in that political season now, and we'll be hearing from candidates, and all of us, I hope, will be participating in, if not already, in primaries and elections. It is a sacred duty, and we are now in the most trying of times, I believe, in our nation's history. That's been said a lot over the years. I'm senior editor of the New American Magazine, and so every day for the last 40 plus years, I survey what's going on in the world and here in the country, and with our other editors and our writers. I'm a writer, a correspondent, and investigative reporter, as well as an editor. And so you all are very well aware, as Mary outlined at the beginning in her introduction, we have a host of very serious crises assaulting our country, our nation, our communities, our families. As never before, we see attacks coming from virtually every side, economically, on a personal financial basis, and now more recently with regard to food shortages and potential famine. our open borders, CRT, the LGBTQ, LMNOP, XYZ, things going on in our schools and with our tenderest citizens, our children. Where do we begin and what do we do in this political season? As I said, I deal with all those things daily, writing articles myself or assigning them to other writers, and we can't really go into any of those. So I actually wanted to focus more along the lines what the professor said. He said, really what we're facing are not really political issues, but philosophical issues. And I would go deeper into philosophy. There are moral issues. And so what I would like to do is recur to our, well, first of all, show you a couple of examples that happened here recently. Probably most of you are familiar. We have the first slide. So I live in Coeur d'Alene, outside of Coeur d'Alene, my little ranch. And you may have seen last weekend the LGBTQ, LMNOP event in Coeur d'Alene City Park, where they had drag queens and for children. It was a family-friendly event, so they brought the kids out for all the drag queens. I was here in Spokane a couple of years ago when you had the drag queen story hours at the libraries here. This has become a almost normal thing in many communities there. So this was an event that was co-sponsored by the Temple of Satan. And again, we were told that's a wonderful thing, that Satanists are just normal people too. They were going to have unbaptisms there to wash away baptisms from Christians who'd been baptized, who wanted to join the new satanic cult. This gained quite a bit of attention in Coeur d'Alene because just a couple of weeks before, the Satanic Temple, which was co-sponsoring the event, had appeared on the Adopt a Highway signs going into and out of Coeur d'Alene. So they have decided to become very active there and to, along with the various liberal left groups, claim Kootenai County for themselves. They're doing this around the country. So there's a close-up of it. That is not up there now. Someone took it down. I'm not sure who, but anyways, the temple sign is, the Satanic Temple sign is down on both entry and exit of Coeur d'Alene. But what we're really seeing here, I mean, when it gets to this level, we're obviously dealing with a existential threat of moral crisis. And this is something that our founding fathers recognized we could not survive and have a free constitutional republic. We wouldn't have freedom if we allowed this kind of immorality to gain a foothold in our country. So what I'd like to do is recur to some of our founders, and starting off with George Washington. In his famous farewell address, he said this: "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these finest props of the duties of men and citizens. And let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle." He was not alone in that. Virtually all of the founding fathers of that generation, who were men of great erudition and learning, of history, of the whole sociological development of man, recognized this was true. Patrick Henry, who is the great patriot, had this to say on the same subject: Bad men cannot make good citizens. It is impossible that a nation of infidels or idolaters should be a nation of free men. It is when the people forget God that tyrants forge their chains. A vitiated state of morals, a corrupted public conscience is incompatible with freedom. No free government or the blessings of liberty can be preserved to any people but by a firm adherence to justice, moderation, temperance, frugality, and virtue, and by a frequent recurrence to fundamental principles. That would seem self-evident, but it is challenged today. John Adams, who is our second president, said this: "We have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Avarice, ambition, revenge, or gallantry would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the government of any other." And just so we get a woman's touch in here, since she was a wife and of course closest advisor to President John Adams, she said, "A patriot without religion," Abigail Adams, "a patriot without religion, in my estimation, is as great a paradox as an honest man without the fear of God. It is possible that he whom no moral obligation binds can have any real goodwill towards men? Can he be a patriot who by an openly vicious conduct is undermining the very bonds of society? The scriptures, righteousness exalted a nation." I'll give another example here. It's important for us to realize that this was recognized not only by our American founding fathers here, but by all the great men of history. We could look at, for instance, Edmund Burke, the great British statesman. And he said, "Men are qualified for civil liberty in exact proportion to their disposition to put moral chains upon their own appetites, in proportion as their love to justice is above their rapacity, in proportion as their soundness and sobriety of understanding is above their vanity and presumption, in proportion as they are more disposed to listen to the counsels of the wise and the good, in preference to the flattery of knaves. Society cannot exist unless a controlling power upon the will and the appetite be placed somewhere, and the less of it there is within, the more there must be without. It is ordained in the eternal constitutional things that men of intemperate minds cannot be free. Their passions forge their fetters." And I would follow that up with one more. Excuse these lengthy quotes. And this one comes from one who is less well known, the great 19th century Spanish Juan Donoso Cortez. And he said, "There are only two possible forms of control, one internal and the other external, religious control and political control. They are of such a nature that when the religious barometer rises, the barometer of the political control falls. And likewise, when the religious barometer falls, the political barometer, that is political control and tyranny, rises. That is the law of humanity, a law of history." And so I submit that beyond the political, the actual nuts and bolts of politics, we must turn our attention with utmost zeal and urgency to restoring the moral base of everything that we do in our society, of teaching our children, of protecting them against all of the evils that are flourishing in our society, and of fortifying ourselves. Our founding fathers gave us a constitutional republic of limited government. If we believe in the truths that our founders said, they said, if we do not have the internal controls over ourselves, the moral controls, then we'll end up having massive political control, political tyranny. And so we at the New American try to focus on not only all of the current events, things that are happening in what are causing them as their most current political instruments, but what it base underneath it, what is the moral foundation? God, family, and country, and those things that policies and laws that we should support, that support God, family, and country, that will give us a moral basis to have a free and growing and prosperous republic. Thank you.
I'd like to thank my own.
No,
There we go. I'd like to thank so much for Mary and Michael for inviting me here today. And quite an honor to sit at the same table with such brilliant men as these. I feel a little out of place, but I do have a fairly interesting story to tell that relates very much to keeping America strong. My solution is by understanding how we became that way and how we could lose it. And that is my story of how we could lose it, how this has been done over and over again, and how you will see what I'm about to share with you. You've seen aspects of this happening here, but it could get quite a bit worse. My story begins in Santiago, Chile. I was living there with my two sons. I am a typical homeschool mom who thought that her sons needed a final exam and decided as that final exam that we would sell everything that we own. We would go to a foreign country where we've never been, where we didn't speak the language, where we didn't know anybody, and we had no clue how we were going to survive. You know, I thought that was typical homeschool field trip, and wanted to teach my kids that immigrants have had to do this over and over and over throughout history. And you know what? We never know if this might happen in the US. What greater education could I give my kids than the ability to find out you could do this? It's been done over and over by immigrants, and you could do it too. And better to do it in peaceful times than have to do it in times when you really have to leave urgently. So in 2012, I took my two sons on this foreign experience as a single mom. And we were prospering in Chile. I had done a lot of research beforehand and knew that Chile had successfully thrown out communism in the 1970s and had turned into the most prosperous nation in Latin America. They had embraced free market economics and were doing very, very well. And I thought, what better country to take my sons to? So we did. And we lived very well and we were prospering. And then on October 18, 2019, suddenly there was an attack on the subway system, supposedly because of a 4-cent increase in the price of the public transportation system. The subway system was attacked. Well over half of the subway stations were completely destroyed. Then they began destroying the public bus system. And of course, all of us are thinking, what the heck? Is this really what you do over a 4-cent increase? So the public transportation was attacked, both the subways. This is one of the largest subway stations, absolutely completely destroyed. Most of these stations took upwards to a year to repair the damage and to get everything functioning again, along with over 200 of the city buses in Santiago having been burnt and destroyed. Of course, looting happened in all the stores. I just noticed this as I was putting this together. In the bottom, somewhere I have here is returning the bullets. This is the way they return the violence of the government to them by looting and destroying the stores. This is the Walmart of Chile. Walmart owns Leader. 30% of the grocery stores in the city were completely destroyed and or burnt and completely looted. Imagine 30% of your grocery stores gone within a couple of days. Every piece of glass in just about every business was smashed and then looted. Over 10,000 small businesses were destroyed. The young people were out in force fighting with the police and the military. The average age, I would say, they were mostly young men, probably between the age of 16 and 25, felt that they were fighting very valiantly for the good of their country and correcting all the injustices in this horrible country of Chile that I had chosen out of all the countries in the world that I could take my kids to. Historical buildings were burnt to the ground. Churches, over 200 churches were burnt to the ground. Of course, first after having looted and rioted all the valuable artwork and smashing the pulpits to bits so that they could take those out and use them for their bonfires. And of course, and I say of course because beware, it is coming, a call for, if not a new constitution, an amended constitution, because you know the Constitution was the fault of all their problems. In fact, I surveyed about 70 people and said, if you're in favor of a new constitution, which by the way, I'd never heard this call for a new constitution in the 7 years that I'd been living there. Never once from anybody had I heard that there was a problem with their constitution. But overnight, the media and the masses were calling for a new constitution. So I asked them, show me specifically what's in the Constitution that's causing all these problems that you're willing to riot and destroy and burn your whole country over. And they all said, well, all of it. I said, what do you mean, all of it? Well, it was written under a dictator. I said, yeah, but I know your history. Apparently you don't. When that bloody mass murderer dictator voluntarily stepped down, that's how bloody mass murdering kind of a dictator he was, voluntarily stepped down. The Congress went to work and they amended the Constitution hundreds of times until a socialist Congress and a socialist president agreed that this was a good Constitution. And then there was no more speak of the Constitution. But suddenly the entire country was calling for a new Constitution. So based on my survey, this election was going to take place. The president had agreed to an election of the people of whether they wanted a new Constitution. Based on my survey, I said, oh boy, this country is in trouble. This is not going to survive this, and I'm out of here. And so I came back. Fortunately, one of my sons had already returned, and the other one returned thanks to COVID. That got him to come home. But I knew that this was not a good thing for a sudden call for a new constitution. And I knew that this was not going to end well and thought better to come home now. Enough of a field trip. It's time to head home. And thankfully, shortly after that, I felt that there were more people who were catching on to this. I wasn't the only one. I was probably one of the first one to realize what this was. But thankfully, very quickly, others, a few, I should say, were catching on to this. And thankfully, someone wrote this banner saying, the media lies to the world about us. Chile is under communist and terrorist attack. The solution for me to keeping America strong is education. How did this happen in Chile? How is it possible? The actual statistics after the election of whether they should have a new constitution or not was quite shocking. Any guesses on what percentage of the people thought this was a good idea? Any guesses?
66.
How about 79%? Almost 80% of the people thought this would be a good idea for a new constitution, but they'd never read it. Everyone I asked had never read it, and they voted away their constitution that had made them the most prosperous nation in Latin America, that was largely duplicated after the United States Constitution. How is it possible that a population would vote it away without even knowing what it said? Do you think this could happen here? Do you think we know our Constitution? Do you think we understand the principles of liberty? And especially, do you think if you're 60 or under, that you know these principles? All it took was a 4-cent increase in the price of the public transportation system to light this country on fire, to add fuel to it, to bring people out into the streets, to riot, to loot, to destroy their culture, to destroy their religion, all because they felt there were injustices in the world, to overthrow their constitution. It gets worse than that, because they thought that they were a very democratic nation and the people should choose whether they should have a new constitution. They were also going to let their people choose who their delegates would be, who would write their new constitution. Sounds like a great idea, right? Because, just about anybody could write a new constitution. And so the leftists are no stupid. They're no dummies. They knew how to run elections, and they said, well, they're not going to vote for anybody from the far right, and they're not going to vote for anybody from the far left. So, hey, guys, let's all run as independents. And the people are so smart. They're such great voters. They're so well informed. They said, hey, let's not vote for the left. Let's not vote for the right. Let's vote straight down the line and vote for the independents. And 75% of the delegates who just finished rewriting their constitution were far left Marxists who rewrote their constitution. And just to make sure that everybody got their say on it, the draft constitution now has 499 articles. I'm sure every voter is going to read all of those articles before they vote on this new constitution, right? So understanding principles of liberty and understanding that it is we, the people, who are the guardians of our Constitution and the guardians of liberty. If we don't do this education, then the media and others will lead us into the revolution of the ignorant. That's my story.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we got about 15 minutes before we go ahead and turn the show over to Ms. Michelle Lee and the folks of Washington for Change for candidate introductions and 2-minute speeches. Anybody out here in the audience have any questions for any of the panel members, please?
They were great. This is for Leah. I wanted to ask you, I listened to your story, and it's very similar to my experience in Ghana. I went through 3 military coups, and back in the early 80s. And
That mic's not on.
as for today, as we're seeing the changes taking place in education, and now with the economy and all of this, what do you see that's coming ahead? And what do you think is that trigger that's going to be similar to what's happening in Chile?
I think there's many possibilities of it. Certainly inflation is going to have people freaked out pretty well here very soon. This country's never seen hyperinflation. Inflation is one thing where you are slowly able to adapt. I don't think we're going to be slowly adapting to this. I think it's going to be very rapid. And when people can no longer afford food, boy, I'll tell you, life is going to change for us greatly. When people can no longer afford to put the gas in their car, to get to their job, to make a paycheck that isn't going to pay for their bills, things are going to change. And when people are desperate, they will seek for desperate answers. And when a hero comes and says, I will save you, the people will massively vote for their savior. And the possibility of rioting like this is very real. I think life is going to change for us pretty quickly here.
Okay, so question for Bill Jasper. It seems like the Birch Society is, they're always very anti-communist, but it seems like communism is more a means to an end. The real culprit is globalism and the destruction of the West. Is that what you would agree with?
Yes, but I don't see them as being mutually exclusive, and in fact, they are not. Many of you here are aware of, particularly since 2020, the World Economic Forum, which is the big billionaires club at Davos, all of the big, Bill Gates, George Soros, Ted Turner, all of the big billionaires from Goldman Sachs and Citibank, etc. fly into Davos every year, and they have, in addition to that, all these other globalist events. In 2020, they really broke onto the public consciousness with their proposal for the Great Reset. And their Great Reset calls for a radical overhaul of the whole planet, of all societies, of all countries, economically, politically, socially, psychologically, biologically, spiritually. And who are these people that think they're gods, that they can completely change the whole earth? Well, they actually do. Some of them, like Yuval Noah Harari, have said, there is no God up there. We are gods. We can change this whole world, and there is no right or wrong. It's what we make of it. Well, these folks, the globalists, are really no different from the communists. And in fact, as we've been writing about for years and pointing out, Xi Jinping, communist dictator of China, and all the communist, Chinese Communist Party officials are regulars at the World Economic Forum. Bill Gates, George Soros, all the top bankers and people at the World Economic Forum they love communist China, and they have invested billions there. And Bill Gates was inducted into the Chinese Academy of Sciences there. So they are intertwined just like this. They have a common goal, which is what? They want absolute control, all concentrated in the omnipotent state. In the case of the World Economic Forum, they want it as a corporate state. Well, guess what? That's the same thing the way it is in China. The government, the huge Chinese corporations and the government are all totally intertwined. And so, yes, we haven't stopped at all our analysis and focus and exposing of communism. What we've shown is that the globalists are working and have been working for a long time with them. And so we have to have a more sophisticated understanding of our opponents, I should say enemies, foreign and domestic, that we're facing here, because we have enemies both within and without. And the globalists fit both of those categories.
Anybody else? Questions? The panel members?
Sure. Question for Leah. Southwell looked a lot like Minneapolis. There are some of those pictures. Yeah. And I walked those streets in Minneapolis. So I'm trying to get the correlation of a 4-cent increase, insignificant. So like in Minneapolis, and I escaped, I left. It was like they were ready. They were looking for an event, didn't matter what the event was. And the Minneapolis police, they had a problem. You know, it's not just that event, others before it, but are you saying that it's just, they're just looking for an event to do and then to trigger them and then go do their damage and take
Revolution is started by a spark. It was merely a spark of injustice. They've gotten our young people so fired up about injustice that any spark of it in any way could cause an explosion. Social explosion is what they call it in Spanish of what this was. It's just a spark. What that spark will be next, we know what the prior sparks were about, but a spark of injustice that the media can then feed off of and fuel the emotions of the people.
Any further questions? Got one right here.
William, it struck me in reading all of those quotes from founding fathers and other historic figures that we see those as warnings of what could go wrong, but others see those as a roadmap to how to get what they want. And so a lot of times I think we forget that we need to watch out for those things, not to protect ourselves from them, but to see what other people are thinking and how they're using those ideas against us.
Absolutely, very well taken point. The enemies of freedom, enemies of America, know the enemies of all free countries know that if you destroy the morality of a country, Mike Fagan at the beginning read the statistics about fatherless America. If you destroy the family, take the fathers out of the families, you have a recipe for all of the social pathologies that he listed. We've seen those over and over again. Do you think our enemies don't know that? Yeah, they want to get fathers out of the home, tell dads that, hey, go off and do your thing, abandon your kids, tell women you don't need him. Kids are growing up without the necessary fatherhood that they need. And that is just one example out of the many things. They're telling us, if any of you have seen Matt Walsh's new movie documentary, What is a Woman? So you get into that. We have in every college, university, women's studies departments, whatnot. But as we saw with Ketanji Brown Jackson, when she was being questioned for her confirmation, she was asked by Marsha Blackburn, Senator, well, what is a woman? And here she, who is now confirmed for the Supreme Court, couldn't answer that. She said, well, I can't answer that. I'm not a biologist. And that's what you see in Matt Walsh's documentary all over. The people become so woke and so disoriented and so dishonest, they can't even say what a woman is. A woman, as he points out, is an adult female human being. It's very simple. It's scientific, it's evidence-based, but they won't say it. Then he goes overseas. He's in Africa and Latin America. He asks these simple people that don't have a college education, they haven't been to school and that, and he asks them what a woman is, and they can all tell him what a woman is. And he says, well, in America and in Germany and England, we can't tell what a woman is. And would you want to go there? All these Africans and village people out in here, and I say, no, I wouldn't want to go there. You know, that's how ridiculous we've become. And so, yes, our enemies know that if they can so disorient our country that people become afraid to speak the truth about the most basic things, then essentially they've won.
We have time for one more question. Oh, wouldn't you know it? My luck. Ask for one, you get two.
Thank you. Didn't want the professor to be feeling left out here. But you led off with a debate on philosophy. So not a debate on philosophy, but the thought of philosophy. The problem was a philosophical one. When the Soviet Union went down, we thought communism was killed. Obviously not. And it must have raised a whole crop of new useful idiots, because that seems to be what we're seeing right now. But it seems like perhaps communism is a vehicle that might be a useful part of what's happening in Davos. Comments?
Oh, yeah, I mean, and I would piggyback on both of my colleagues' comments, in particular Bill's remark about, was it Rob Chase, you said it is communism and globalism, or aren't they the same thing? I think when you look at it historically, Marxism, even below communism, when you really look at it over the course of these nearly 200 years, it's just a strategy for revolution making. I mean, what Marxism does best is identify a group of oppressors and a group of oppressed, and one group is irredeemable and the other group can do no wrong. And then you fan the flames of this resentment, and then the spark, yeah, 4 cents subway increase, why not? You know, but sometimes you don't get the spark. I think that's why we're so madly in love with false flags. You know, you can engineer that spark, but it all seems to be, you know, historians like to talk about, you know, underlying and immediate causes. Well, these long-term social problems are the underlying cause of what's going on in this civilization. And once you've got people really groomed, if I can use that word, groomed and indoctrinated and basically just completely saturated with Marxist ideology, which comes at us from all sides, it doesn't take much to flip it. So, and let me mention, the last thing I'll say is about Solzhenitsyn again. When he came to America, he gave a speech at Harvard in 1976, the commencement address, and he said, you people don't have anything figured out. Speaking to the Americans, so everything that we've been through, you better watch out because you're heading straight down the road. So it's more than an ideology. It's a rhetorical strategy for fomenting revolution. And if people don't wake up, it's going to happen again and again and again. So, but thanks for the question.
All right, last question, ladies and gentlemen.
My name is Simon Way, originally from England, but I'm an American now. Yesterday, just in the last couple of days, I heard talk show host Jesse Kelly report that there's about 87 food processing plants burned in the country so far this year. I'm not sure if that's true, but I wondered if you heard that, and it would seem to me like part of a plan to like really create a lot of unrest, a lot of trouble, a lot of shortage. Have you heard that?
Would you like me to? So at the New American, we have, this thing about the food processing plant started about a month and a half ago. All of a sudden, we started seeing a series of various food processing plants, from bulk foods to liquid things to all different kinds of foodstuffs. And it seemed an inordinate number of these factories and manufacturing and processing plants burning down, meat and vegetable, all different kinds of things. So that looked rather suspicious, and there were a lot of stories on the internet about it, a lot of speculation on talk radio about it. So we just assigned a couple of journalists to look into it. And first you go on what is publicly available and what the police and fire reports and official investigations give for the causes. And so far, there is, from our investigation, we have not been able to show that there is any concerted plan, that this is part of a nationwide plan to ruin our food supplies. We did a cover story that looked at 12 of the major issues that are affecting food and food production here in the United States that are unprecedented, all coming together at this time in a perfect way that could cause the United States, which has always been the land of plenty, and we've never experienced food shortages of this kind before, even during the Depression. The attacks, or rather the explosions and fires at the food processing plants, was just one of those 12 issues. We haven't been able to identify thus far that there is anything behind it yet, but we're still waiting for official investigations in many of these cases. But we right now have so many of these different things coming together. If you look at the newamerican.com feast or famine, we go through all of those. And I ended my article by saying it would behoove all Americans, if they're not already done so, to begin stockpiling a pantry of food. There's no excuse in this country for us to have panic and mayhem when at this point we have the ability, virtually every American family, to have at least a couple of weeks, if not several months of food, so that we don't become easily manipulated by politicians and bureaucrats who want to panic us into tyranny.
You may also want to make it a point to research some breaking news that just broke about 24, 48 hours, where we had 1,000 beef cattle went hooves up and died allegedly from the sweltering heat. Was it 10,000? Okay, well, there you go. That even further illustrates that point. So it definitely behooves American families to do exactly what Mr. Jasper is suggesting right now, and do a little bit of prepping, because you never can tell when the next calamity is going to occur, whether it be a natural disaster or otherwise. All right, that concludes the forum portion of today's event. I would now like to call Ms. Michelle Lee up to the podium to take over the meeting. And here is where it definitely behooves everybody in the room to pay attention to who you're hearing from, because we would all like to, at the end of the day, be in a position to make an informed decision on who it is that we are voting for, on who it is that we are going to support. So with that, welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Please put your hand together to thank Mr. Mike Fagan for that awesome MC job. Thank you. And before I start my part for the next